I'm using 5-gallon container grow bags. These will allow air to come through the bag, so it helps keep the soil from getting too moist, lets all the moisture out that is excess, as well as helps terminate the roots. So there's two different ways to terminate roots with containers, either air or light. If you have containers that you're growing in that are light colored or clear, the root will come out, get the sun, and stop growing. Same thing with air. In this case, I'm using air, and I'm using these because I don't really want to use plastic. So I'm just filling these up with organic soil. In this case, a commercial mix that I'm using, but any will work. I just prefer organic for things I'm going to eat. So just breaking it up. I'll water it in here in a minute. I don't like to fill my bags all the way up, and especially not before I water them in. This helps to settle it, so you actually know what you're getting. If you don't do this first, you'll end up with a lot of space. It's probably enough to get going here. There we go. And now I know I needed quite a bit more. There we go. That's good. I'm leaving about so much from the top. And that way you can see it's a little easier to control your plant. You can get down to the bottom, see everything, as well as you're not getting overflow anytime you do water. You're not getting dirt coming out of your bag, that kind of thing. Now in this case, we'll put a hole in the middle here. For the plant, because I'm using seedlings. I'm not doing seed. So they already have dirt with them. And there we go. Now that's just the first bag with dirt. I'm going to do more to it than just that. But I just wanted to show it one time. And then once all of them are filled, then I'll move on to the next. I like this Miracle Grow Organics, the performance ones. I've used it before for the last couple of years. It's done a great job. I know I'm not getting paid for it. I just like it. So I'm using 5-gallon containers. I've used 10-gallon before. And they grow fine in them. But the problem with the 10-gallon, I find, is that they focus more on root growth and less on upper. So 5 gallons is produced a lot better than a 10-gallon container, in my personal experience. So I'm going with 5s. You also really don't want to rinse your hands over it too much. The first time or two that you do, you'll get a lot more salt into it, and salt isn't good for growing things. But if you're only, like here, I'm doing it all at once, so only the first time or two get much in the way of salt, and it's only my hand. So, but if you're really working on it, or you're working on it throughout the season, you don't want to rinse your hands over the plant, because each time you're adding a little salt to it. Oh yeah, I don't think I explained why it's good to terminate the roots. Normally, if you have them, let's say you have your plants growing in black buckets, then they're not getting air or light. The roots will go into the side of the container and then turn and keep growing back in on themselves and become root bound, and then the plant gets stunted. It won't grow above ground very much more after that. So it's not good for it. It stops sucking up the nutrients out of the soil very well. So you want them to terminate. So in these, they come out to the edge, touch the container, and air can touch them, and they stop growing. And they keep growing internally, but they don't wrap in on themselves. They just keep growing out anywhere there's open space. And so they suck up more and more nutrients the whole time. You don't run into that problem when it's in the ground, because they can just keep growing. But it's nature's way of, like, if a plant has a root going over to a hill, and then it comes out the side of the hill, it stops growing. There are a few plants that that's not true with. The root becomes hardened on top wherever the sun is, and it can keep growing, but it'll go back into the dirt. For example, like tree roots, they can come above ground and then go back below. And then if you notice, the root that is above, it has basically bark on it. Well, normally it wouldn't have any protective layer on it. It would be underground. But like your vegetable plants and everything don't do that. So all right. Now I don't have enough dirt to do all the containers right now. I'll go get more later. I just wanted to go ahead and get started on these and also see how many containers, the bags I did. This is good to get started though. Let's see. This one's a Roma tomato. Anytime you're transplanting, you want to wet everything down really well. It helps prevent transplant shock. Basically, your plants will take some time to adjust to their new container, and then they'll start growing. The less shock that they have, the faster they start growing, so the better, healthier plant you're going to have. Before I put this in, almost forgot. I'm using feather meal. Basically, it's ground up chicken feathers. It is a source of nitrogen. It's a slow release, so it takes time to release it and help your plants, which is why I'm putting it in right away. But it's much easier to use this and not kill your plants. Too much nitrogen will kill your plants. They keep sucking it up no matter what. They'll keep using it even if it will kill them. So you have to be careful what you're doing. I use more than anybody recommends, and I do just fine. But I've played with it for years now and feel like I know what I'm doing. Things like blood meal, though, are fast release. So more or less you put it in there, you water, it starts releasing right away. That's good for certain situations, but not in the beginning. When they're seedlings, you don't want very much. They can't handle it. You stress them and they'll die. So you have to be careful. And again, it's organic. I don't use chemical fertilizer. I realize everything's made up of chemicals, blah, blah, blah. I get it, but I'd rather use an organic source. And this keeps working just fine. So anyway, I'm pouring some directly in the hole where the plant's going to go. And it's not really a big measurement because, again, it is slow release, so you have much less risk. It won't break down evenly in the sense of like it's all going to break down at once. It won't do that. So you don't have too much risk. But you can still kill them if you overdo it. So best to err on the side of caution in the beginning if you don't know what you're doing. Let me go ahead and wet all this down again. Again, you want everything really, really wet when you transplant. It helps your plants tremendously. And I'll water them again once they're in and covered with soil. Okay. So, trick with tomato plants. The lower branches here, I'm not sure how well you can see, but the lower branches here on these, you want to break off and then bury it deeper to about there. That'll allow the spots that you ripped off to actually sprout roots. So it'll grow even better. The plant will still grow up tall, big, bushy, no problem. And you can do things later once it's grown to help make it bushier and produce better as well. And I'll show you that as we go. So this one's a Roma. Okay. Once it's out, you don't really want to leave it exposed to the sunlight too long. It's not natural for it. But you want to very gently break up the root ball. Just enough to stretch it out a little bit. You don't want to damage it too much. But that helps make it grow. There we go. Then you want to mash it down. You want to throw some dirt on it and mash it down. So this is one of the other reasons I left more space so I could add more on top. Oh, whoop. I spaced cutting off the branches and burying it deeper. So just pull it back up, dig the hole a little deeper, and you can put it back in. So again, you just pull them off. You want to rip them at the stem. Don't leave anything left, because then it will just try to branch again. And again, you want to make sure those spots that you've ripped the branches off are underground. And that's the first one planted. And again, I'm going to water it in. And you want to be gentle with them. You don't want to blast it full power or anything. And then I'm going to use tomato cages around mine. You can use a stick. You can all kinds of different ways to support it. But especially being in containers, you need to support them as they grow. It's no big deal until later. But if you don't do it when they're young, you'll have a very hard time putting it on later when it's a big plant. Plus, you'll damage the roots if you do it later. There. And that just allows you to hold the branches up, support the branches so they don't break off. I end up with a lot of tomatoes and the weight pulls them down. So I have to be real careful, pay attention as they grow. As you get better at it, you'll produce a lot more. Make sure you get those branches under the dirt. Otherwise, there was no point in breaking them off. And that's not something you have to do. It just promotes better growth. Spacing is important right now. I just have them real close together as I'm working on them. Here shortly, when these are done, I'll space them out more because they get big and bushy. So they need to have enough space, one, so that they get enough light, enough air is going through it to help dry everything out every time you water it, and also insects. Because if you put them too close together, you'll have aphids. For the tomatoes here, you'll have aphids crawling across, jumping onto others. And you'll end up just a huge amount of them, I know, because I've done it. So it's better to space them out. I may even put some down off the deck, because that still gets all day sun as well. Okay, this is another Aroma tomato plant. I make sauce and everything, but here are two. So I'm gonna split these up and they can go in different containers, and I have twice as many for the same price as one. Now this one is not as healthy, but that's okay. It can still catch up. I'll feed it really well. It'll be fine. If it looked kind of sickly, really too elongated, anything like that, then I wouldn't use it. I'd just pull it and kill it and use only the bigger, healthier one. But it should be fine. Now, pulling them apart can damage them a bit more, so you don't really need to pull the root ball because you'll already be disturbing the root ball. So it's a little different. But here, same thing, you pull it out. All right, let's see if I can get it loose without damaging too much. So it's got a big root going that way. And the one I'm going to damage will be the weaker of the two, because I want to promote the bigger, healthier one. But tomato plants are pretty strong, pretty good at regrowing. Matter of fact, you can break a branch off, plant it, keep it watered, and it'll grow a new tomato plant. So there we go. Not as much root system. I've damaged it a lot, but it'll be fine. So I am going to break up the bottom of this root ball just a little bit more. You see how it's wrapped around? Because it was in a cup. As soon as it hit light, it started turning and going away. But because it's in such a small container, it was trying to force itself to keep going. Normally in larger ones, they don't do it as bad. They still do it some. Yeah, these you could actually grow into other tomato plants. But since they're low branches and small, I'm not worried about it. Plus, I have enough. I don't really need more. But I've done it before. It doesn't require any any rooting hormone or anything like that, like some plants would. Tomatoes will just do it. This one likely won't grow as big as that one or the others, but it'll still grow pretty well and produce. And everything should be just fine. As long as I take good care of it. It'll require a little more water, a little more babying in the beginning. Or it may not. Sometimes they do just fine. But at worst, I just have to give it a little extra water, because it doesn't have the root ball like the bigger one does. So its roots will take a little longer to reach other areas. When you're putting these in, you want to make sure you're avoiding hitting the root ball. You've already damaged it some, but when you put them in, you don't want to put a post right through it. Okay, here's the big beef. And this one is another double, so I'll end up with 2. So, and then the rest are peppers. And the trays I have, I'll be doing green beans, and I'm not sure if I'm going to do anything else besides green beans in the trays. Normally I just do green beans. So if I had and so I put out all kinds of stuff. And I'll share some of those pictures if I can find them from there. But I don't have access to all that since I moved away. Right. So I went and got more dirt, soil, whatever you want to call it. Now it's onto the peppers. With peppers, you do not break off the bottom leaves, branches, whatever you want to call them. They don't act the same as tomatoes. And like I said, with peppers, you do not break off the leaves. You just plant it as deep as you can until you get to the first branch. Make sure that stays above ground. I have a couple different types of green beans I'm going to try this year. Well, this one's the one I normally use, and then I have a different type that I'm going to try this year. This is Blue Lake Bush Green. I really like them. A lot of people use them. They grow great. Have no problems in containers with them. And the bush beans are stringless, so you don't have, like with pole beans, you would have to strip out the string, the fibrous string that is in them. These you can just snap and eat. Normally I would put 5 in, but I'm only going to put 4 in this year. I want to see if they grow better. Three and 4. That way they have a little more space, a little more air can get into them, help dry out the top of the soil a little bit. That kind of thing. I don't want them so crowded because I ended up with a disease last year. I forget what it was now. But basically, it was just too much moisture. So they need enough space to breathe. I'm going to put 2 here because I'm not sure if that first one was any good or not. And again, I'm only putting 4, and I can replant. If they don't come up, I can replant them. It's no big deal. They'll grow fast enough that it doesn't really matter if some of them don't come up right away. Anyway, that's pretty much it till I get another bag of soil. I'll fill this in and then plant these with the other green beans. So that's it. And of course, I'll make other videos as it grows and as I'm doing things to it. That way I can talk about how to do things. Try to share as much information as I can about it. Because I grow my plants pretty well. And again, they're all organically grown. I don't use any of the chemical fertilizers or anything like that. So, but they still produce very well and grow pretty strong. So, guess we'll see what happens this year. This is approximately 2 weeks after the first set of videos where I was planting everything. You can see everything's doing well. Let's see, here's the little Roma that I said wouldn't probably do as well. Well, it's not, but it'll catch up mostly. And then here are the green beans. So everything's doing well. I did plant 4 per container. So like here, they're still sprouting. They're still coming up. There's a few that haven't come up yet, but they will, or I'll replant them. But everything looks good for now.